Morning, good morning.
The commentary? Yes, it is, right? Or is it just linear?
What?
Is it commentary or just linear?
It's this commentary too, yeah. Okay, we'll start. So we're, if you're still using the booklet, because you're online, you don't have the book yet. So we are on page number 7. It's in Perek Ches, and in the new lessons in Heichaltzu, it's on page 64. So yesterday, we started this Ois Ches, chapter 8. We explains once again how the world of Tohu, on one hand, we're talking about a world that's higher than Atzilus, and even higher up in the realm of the infinite worlds. But nevertheless, there was the shattering of the vessels, Shviras HaKelim. And that happened because there was a lack of bittul. Thank you very much. There was a lack of bittul. And he explains that what happened in the world of Tohu was there was a ratzu without a shuv. We explained this yesterday, that on one hand, in all the spheres, all the angels, all the souls, their relationship with Hashem is ratzu v'shuv, which means they are running forward, running towards Hashem, and then they pull back. Because if they run towards Hashem all the way, they would expire. So they have to sort of go back, shuv. On a simple, practical level, it means that tzaddikim who love Hashem, and their love for Hashem is the strongest love we can possibly imagine. If they would allow this love to continue sort of without any holding back, then they would expire like the 2 sons of Aaron, or like those sages who went into the paradise with Rabbi Akiva. So there has to be both movements, to go forward and to pull back. So one would think on the surface, that those tzaddikim who have this incredible love to the point that the neshama is expired, wouldn't that mean that their bittul is greater than those that were able to contain their neshama? So the answer is no. Because those that their desire to connect to Hashem is so strong to the point that it's beyond control, and they lose the ability to hold on and to contain themselves, soul in the body, that means that what's dominating is their personal pleasure. Again, let's not forget, when I'm talking about tzaddikim and on the highest levels, so all this is at a very subtle level, but it means that it's about me and my spiritual pleasure. The one that's able to contain himself and retain, hold on to the neshama, it should remain in the guf. That means that the pleasure that Hashem has is overriding my pleasure. So there's more bittul in the shuv than in the ratzu. And the same is with the world of tohu. The difference between the world of tohu and the world of tikkun is, in the world of tikkun, which is the world of atzilus, the light of the spheres remains contained in the vessels. In the world of Tohu, the light of that world wasn't able to be contained, and the light left the vessels, and as a result of that, the vessels were shattered. So the reason why it left the vessels is also because they were lacking in bittul. So how does this go together with the other reason for the breaking of the vessels? Because they were separate from each other. So the answer is when there's bittul, when there's oneness with Hashem, then there's also inclusion with all the others. And when there's a lack of bittul, some sort of degree of separation from Hashem, then it also brings separation one from the other. So the spheres in the Tohu world were called Anfin Mispardim, which means separate branches. And that's consistent with the other reason that's given, that the light of Tohu was so intense that it left the vessels and the vessels were shattered. It's clear? Yes. I asked the question, I give the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, there's like some people, let's say that they're not like keeping Torah yet, let's say, and for them it's very hard to like do these things. So for them it's more natural to like eat, sleep, and do like these things, and they need to like take away from themselves to keep Torah. So for them, I think it will be bittul to like be close to Hashem because it's not a natural thing that they are doing in the usual day. And for other people, like learning and davening and all these things is like issues that
Right. Everything would depend on who, what, when, where, and how. Yeah, where it's coming from. In other words, if a person is also going to say, well, I'm going to get very involved in Gashmis, I'm going to eat a lot, I'm going to buy new clothes, get a beautiful home, because ultimately Hashem wants a dwelling place down here. That's also a deception because the person's fooling himself. But really, you're into the Gashmis, not because it's more of Hashem's will, because you're getting more pleasure. So you have to know what the situation is, why the person is doing what they're doing. Okay, so we're on page 64, and the last line where it says, in the middle of the line, Vav Zayin Ayin, which means Vizeh Inyan. Oh, I'm going to read from the bottom, which goes together with the English. So it's 3 lines from the bottom. This is the nature of Klip of Midjan. If you're looking in the booklet, number 7, page number 7, it's 3 lines from the top. Zehu Inyan Klipas Midjan. So this is the nature of the Klip of Midjan. Shuhamadan Vahariv is the klippa that brings the strife and contention. The sinas china me'ishlo re'eyu, and baseless hatred from one person to another. Page 65. Gam shalayasalay shumra klal. Even if the other person never did him any harm, and he not only didn't do harm, he didn't even touch anything belongs to him. Not even 1 iota did he even touch anything that's connected to him. He's not even planning to do something bad to him. Nevertheless, you just can't tolerate him. Not only that, but he hates him utterly. To the extent that can't look at him, can't talk to him. He can't interact with him in any issue. Even when there's something which is davar shebegedusha, which means something related to holiness, to godliness, to Yiddishkeit, to mitzvah. We need to do something together. So there should be a Torah class in this community. We need to do something better. We need to do something together to build a mikveh in the community. We need to do something together to reinforce the kashrus in the community. No, I can't work with this person because he has some sort of a hate for him. And where does this hate come from? It's all based on Yeshus. As a result of that, it leaves no room for the other person. So he can't work with that other person. Page 66. And he will oppose the other person. Again, although he didn't do anything bad to him, and the other person has no reason to be against him for anything. Rak shebazeh shu nimtza b'olam, just the fact that he exists, bazer u'memayit yeshus, that detracts from his yeshus. Like we said before, that if this person occupies space, it leaves less space for me. Even if I'm not in that space, but the mere fact that it occupies space leaves less space for me to spread out. And we see this primarily with children, where they get very upset when you give attention to one child over another. Like someone told me that when his mother, when he was a little child, his mother gave birth, came home with a new baby. So one of the other children said to the mother, take her back to the hospital. No hiding. Take her back to the hospital. What's wrong? Who's bothering you? They sense that they're going to have less attention. Try it. You'll see a mother will tell you that if she picks up a baby, all the other kids will start, crying and screaming, pick me up. It means that's their space. Everyone has their space. So if you occupy my space, you're taking something away from me. So in this case, he's occupying, just by existing, he's occupying a certain space, and that leaves less space for me to spread myself out. Remember, we had in a Mamar a famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Rebbe at his wedding, actually the Friedrich Rebbe, by our Rebbe's wedding, said the same Mamar twice. He said it once at one occasion, and a few days later at another occasion. And he later said that my father, with the Rebbe Rashab, told me to repeat the Mamar a second time. And in this Mamar, I should add a story with the Tzemach Tzedek. So obviously it's something very significant. And the Rebbe spoke about this story more than once, that the Tzemach Tzedek had a chassid, who apparently wasn't just an ordinary chassid, he was a prominent chassid. He was someone who was a man was a man of quality. And he complained to the Tzemach Tzedek that people in shul don't respect me. And I feel that people are stepping all over me. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, who tells you to spread yourself out all over, that wherever people are stepping, they're stepping on you? What does that mean? In other words, if someone has a certain honor in the shul, he feels they're stepping on me because I should have gotten that honor. If someone has a certain privilege that's given to them, why didn't you give it to me? If someone has an opinion, why are you following his opinion? Why don't you follow my opinion? In other words, if I'm supposed to occupy the space, then wherever you step all over me. I remember how some of my children, and probably in every home is that way, had a nature to play with his little toys right by the door, lie down on front of the door and start playing. And then he would complain that the other kids are stepping on him. Yeah. Who tells you to lay down right over there, that wherever they step, they can't get through without stepping on you. So imagine someone spreads himself out in the whole room. Wherever you walk, you're stepping on them. So even if I didn't spread myself out, but if this is my space where I'd like to spread out, at least I have the potential to spread out. And by you being there, you're not even giving me the potential to spread out. That's what's happening. So he hates him. And unfortunately, we see this in the later generations, that this exists in every Jewish community. So in case you're a little bit discouraged, this is going on 100 years ago. That what? That there are different opinions in all issues that are related to the public and the community. There's just opposite, opinions, and people are arguing with each other. And particularly when it comes to Dvarim Shebekidusha. Page 67, he spells it out. For example, about the Rabbanim, who should be the Rav, who should be the Sheikhet, what should be happening in the shul. People find it impossible to come together and have one opinion and do things together. Adrab, on the contrary, If one person says one thing, the other person says the opposite. One person builds something, the other person maharis, he destroys it. So on the surface, it seems to be, what's wrong? We have different opinions, different strokes for different folks. Can it be different opinions? The truth is, the chalukah days, the different opinions really evolves from something else, pure dalavavis, from a division of the hearts. The the fact that this person disagrees with the other person, it's not an intellectual thing, that my brain dictates to me that I should think differently than his brain. But it's he wants it. He wants to have a different opinion. And why does he want to have a different opinion? Because my friend wants the other opinion. This is the principle. This is the general rule. Whatever the other person wants, I have to say the opposite. And later I'll find a good reason why I'm saying it, to legitimize and make it make sense. Page 68. I know mitzad apir levavis. So this is all a result of this separation and the division. It's interesting. There's actually a halacha that a bezdin has to consist of three people, and the three people are three rabbis. They're supposed to make a judgment. So the halacha is that if there are two people sitting there that we know from before that they're opponents to each other for whatever reason, they shouldn't be in the same bezdin. Because then, if one person has a certain opinion, the other person will already have a leaning towards the opposite opinion because they have to say different than this person. So that's what the Rebbe is saying, that you find in communities, people are arguing, this one says this one says that, and it's really not about differences of opinion, but it's unfortunately differences, division. And therefore, what makes me feel good and satisfied is when I say the opposite of the other person. I don't want that person to get credit. I don't want it to be their way. And unfortunately, through this, whatever it is, the community issue that's at hand, that needs to be corrected or needs to be built, actually becomes destroyed because these two people are arguing. And yet they don't pay attention to that, because the main thing is Yeshus. The main thing is I have to be the one who has it his way. If as a result of that, the yeshiva won't be built, the shul won't be fixed, or the mikveh won't be built, I don't care as long as it's my way. Doesn't make any sense. But that's what happens when Yeshus gets into the picture, that I'm so determined that things are my way, not the other person's way, that it could destroy the actual project that's so important or so essential or crucial for a Jewish community. This is the deeper meaning to the story. We know that there's a story in Tanakh, something that happened with Shlomo HaMelech when he first became king. So Shlomo HaMelech was given a gift, and he became the smartest person that ever lived. In terms of wisdom and intelligence, nobody matched the intelligence of Shlomo HaMelech. So one of the first stories which made it known was two women who, they were single women, obviously not women who conducted themselves properly, and they both gave birth to a baby at the same time. And the one woman, her baby didn't survive, and the other woman, her baby died, lived. So the one that her baby died, she went at night and exchanged the babies. She took the dead baby and put it on the other woman's bed, and she took the live baby and put it on her bed. So when the other woman woke up in the morning, she recognized that it's not her baby. So she said, "What did you do?" And she claimed, "No, you're wrong. This is my baby. This is your baby. Your baby is the one that died." And they took him to Shlomo HaMelech for a judgment. And Shlomo HaMelech heard what they both had to say, and then he said, "Well, I guess you say it's your baby, you say it's your baby, and we can't verify who's right. So bring me a sword." And one of the servants brought a sword. And he said, "So in order to be fair, I'm going to cut the baby in half. You'll get one half of the baby, the live baby, you'll get the other half." So the mother of the baby started to scream, no, don't do that. And the other woman said, yes, that's the right thing to do. And then he says, okay, now I know who the real mother is. You can have the baby. It's a cute story, but is this an indication of brilliance and wisdom? It's a nice thing, but I can think of smarter things that people can do. So obviously there's more depth to the story. But one of them is exactly what it says here. Here's a woman that is ready to have the baby cut up and killed so she could have it her way, which means that the other person shouldn't have a live baby. So she won't feel the jealousy for her yeshus. That's what happened. So this is in a sense a model of what goes on. That the baby, let's say, is the shul. Something has to be done in the shul, which would bring, let's say, a shear, which brings something better for all the people that daven in the shul. And this one says to do it this way. The other person argues to say the other way, and he won't allow people to do it their way because it's not what he wants. And not only that, but whatever is supposed to happen will never happen. In other words, you're killing the baby, so it should be your way. And that's basically what's behind this. It's in a sense, it was a story that happened in actuality, but it represents a certain approach so people could destroy the baby because all they want is things should be their way. That's what counts. Okay. Kitzur, the summary of this chapter is Hefresh, the Spheres, the Tikkun, V'Toyu. The difference, we're on page 68. The difference between the spheres of Tikkun and Tohu is Bittul and Yeshus. In Tohu, it's Yeshus. In Tikkun, it's Bittul. Or in other words, Ratzu and Shuv. In the world of Tohu, it's primarily Ratzu. And in the world of Tikkun, it's Shuv. Then he continues, Yeshus is the Siba, the cause for separation and division. And also Sinas Chinam, baseless hate. Now he goes on to elaborate more on this. I just want to say that what's important in this mimer is because we're discussing this person here and we're exposing what's going on, but actually when people are doing what they're doing, they don't see it that way. The person who's fighting that it should be his way doesn't see that, wow, it's my yeshus taking over. In his mind, I'm fighting for what's the right thing, and therefore I have to fight to the end. There's a word, you would say it's a humorous word, but unfortunately there's also truth to it. In Pirkei Avos, it says, when there's a machloikes l'shem shemayim, when two people have an argument which is for the sake of heaven, like Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai has one opinion, Beis Hillel has another opinion, and they're arguing about a Torah subject. These are the kind of things that last forever. This became part of Torah, and it'll always be there. But when two people are arguing, and it's not for the sake of heaven, but for personal things, eventually it'll fall apart. Like Korach, who argued against Moshe. It fell apart. That's the simple meaning. The humorous way of explaining it is like this. When two people are arguing about something personal, I want this money, you want the money. I could say to myself, you know what? Arguing isn't a good thing. Fighting is not a good thing. So I'll lose money for the sake of peace. But when two people are arguing for the sake of heaven, this one says, I think he should be the Rav. And the other one says, I think he should be the Rav. And they're fighting about it. So everyone is thinking, this is better for Yiddishkeit. This is what Hashem really wants. Then I can't compromise. I can't surrender, give up my idea, because after all, it's for the betterment of Torah, for the betterment of Yiddishkeit. So these kind of fights will last forever, because everyone feels like I have to fight to the end, because it's for Hashem, not for me. But the truth is, this is part of the tactic of the Yetzer Hara, that he makes the person think that it's about Hashem. Really, it's my yeshus. Of course, there are situations and there are times that I do have to fight because this is better for Yiddishkeit, for Torah, for mitzvahs. But we have to realize that I can't always trust myself. And so part of this mimer is to describe certain scenarios and help us see that where it's really coming from. For example, here he goes into next chapter, Ois Tes, on page 7 in the booklet, and in the lessons in Heichaltzu, it's page 69. Ois Tes, the 9th chapter. והנה, זהו גם הסיבה מה שנצמח שנאה בין איש לרעהו בלי שום טעם ודס, רק שלא יוכל לסבול רעהו. This is also the cause of this hatred between one person and another, because they can't tolerate another, and what it causes is ma betolov rak ba'ayin ra. He looks at him and he views him always in a negative way. So in other words, when I see someone and I perceive this person in a negative way, or what they're doing as a negative way, is it because I'm just seeing the emes, the truth, or there's something in me that's causing me to see it, distorting my judgment and making me see it in a negative way? So sometimes it's sinas chinam, because I have this feeling, because there's division. That's why I will see what the other person is doing in a negative way. It's to the extent that he despises and he puts down even the good that the other person possesses. He will negate the other person's avodah, put down the other person's avodah, and the other person's Torah and the other person's mitzvahs. Which means, let's say the person does something wrong, and I feel because of that I really hate this person. He has really a bad nature, is a bad person, but he also does good. But because he has this feeling, it's so sort of overwhelming and so all-encompassing that I will even trash all the good that he does. This is not worth anything. His davening not worth anything. His learning not worth anything. And he finds fault in everything good that he does. So it looks like you're just being very precise with your judgment. But the reality is the same thing. It's coming from Yeshus, and you can't stand that person. And you'll find fault in everything they do. And again, this is the person that actually also, some things, it looks like he's repeating it over and over again, maybe to hammer it into our heads, but I'm pretty sure that each line, wherever it is, it's necessary to re-emphasize it for another reason. Even though he didn't do any harm to him, and even though he's not even thinking and planning to do any harm to him, but his heart is just not comfortable with the other person, without a real reason, just can't stand the other person. Page 70. This is the meaning of the pasuk. This is a pasuk in Tanakh where it says "Achechem seinechem," which means your brothers that hate you. That your own brother becomes someone that hates you, unfortunately. Not only is there hate from other nations against Eden, but there's sometimes hate of one Jew towards another Jew. But the deeper meaning is, ach, the word ach, ulashon chibur. The word ach means to join things together. And there are sources where the word is used in a different context, and it means to connect things, to join things together. And that's perhaps the reason why brothers are called achim, because they're united, they're together. So let's look again at these words. Even if there's nothing that really separates between these two people, and that's why they're called brothers. The implication is that they're connected. They really are connected. There's no reason why they shouldn't be connected. But nevertheless, they hate each other, or one hates the other, blishum tamadas. And the reason is, so number one, in this chapter, what he's introducing that's new is that because he can't stand the person, he finds fault even in the good that they do, which that shouldn't be. Even if someone is a person that has faults and does things that are wrong, it should not take away from the good that they do. And if it does, that means that your hate is taking over, and it's because of hate that you see it in a negative light, not because of the good. Here's another example of what could be a manifestation of this hate. What's supposed to happen when a person has a simcha, something good happened to another person. Baby was born, child got married, he bought a new house, bought something new, got a new job, a good job. For Abbas Yisrael, I should be happy for that person. I'm so happy that they have something that's so exciting that happened in their life. But if you have this kind of division and separation, then you don't feel happy. And then not only that you don't feel happy, you don't share the joy with the other person, but chas v'shalom could even be worse than that. Yismach b'levave b'yisurav chas v'shalom rachmanu litzlan. There's a possibility that a person secretly, he might not announce it, he might not talk that way, but in his heart, he's actually happy when the other person is suffering, makes him feel good. And if he's not happy, but at least he won't feel the other person's pain. Again, mitzad Avis Yisrael, you should feel the other person's pain. Let's continue, page 71. Be'emes tzrichim litztar al yisur zilosei. In truth, the person should feel anguish when someone else is suffering. In fact, even more than when you yourself are suffering. Why? I can understand you should feel suffering of another person like your own. What does it mean even more? There was a chassid in Lubavitch. His name was Reb Hendel. And it was known that he excelled in the area of Ahavas Yisrael. There was a story where a certain chassid was arrested. And then after a while, I don't know how long he was in jail, but he was released from jail. So this chassid Reb Hendel, when he was such an emotional person, and he had so much love for one another, that when he heard that this person went out of jail, he was so besimcha, he ran into the Rebbe's room, which is not what you usually do. And he said, the Rebbe, they released him from jail, and he started to dance in the Rebbe's room. And the Rebbe got up and danced with him. So basically, what does it mean? How does a person, it's not so respectful, but he was so overwhelmed with joy that he sort of went out of the line. And the Rebbe loved that, and was not upset with him. So they say that what eventually led to his passing was that there was a fire and someone's house was burned down. In those days, it was not like today with fire insurance. So if a person's house, God forbid, burned down, they were left with nothing. And he was watching the fire and he kept talking about how painful it is. Look what's happening to this person's possession house. And actually from the pain and the anguish, he became sick. And eventually he passed away. He was such an emotional person. That's true Ahavas Yisrael. Ahavas Yisrael means I should be rejoicing with the other person's simcha, and I should be having pain and anguish when the other person is suffering. Tzemach Tzedek, of course, a Rebbe is a Rebbe, but from a Rebbe we can learn. Tzemach Tzedek lived the longest amongst the Rebbes of Chabad up until our Rebbe. Tzemach Tzedek was nostalgic at the age of 77. And he was actually physically very strong. So Tzemach Tzedek once said that really had a bracha from the Alter Rebbe. And the way the Alter Rebbe was known, that the Alter Rebbe would phrase the bracha a certain way, that meant that the person would live, I think, till 100. So he could have lived to 100 years. But he said the tzaras of the Hasidim took away many years of his life. In other words, the anguish that he felt from the fact that this chassid was suffering, that chassid was suffering, that took away, Pasha took away his health, ate away at him, and therefore, instead of living 100 years, he lived for 77. That's what he said. I once heard, this is not from one of the Chabad Rebbe, but a certain Rebbe once said, why is it that when you go to a Rebbe, ask for bracha to be healed or cured or some other, God forbid, tragedy, the Rebbe's bracha helps? How does it help? Well, the simple reason is he's a tzaddik, he prays, and Hashem listens to his prayers. But he gave another reason. He said, because if God forbid somebody's suffering, it means it was decreed in heaven that for whatever reason, this person is destined to suffer. He goes to the Rebbe. When the Rebbe hears about what's happening, the Rebbe is suffering. The Rebbe wasn't destined to suffer. So Hashem has to stop this person's suffering, so the Rebbe should be able to not have anguish and suffer, because he suffers along with every single person. So true Ahavas Yisrael should be both. Number one, I should be rejoicing with the other person's simcha. And number two, I should be feeling pain and anguish when the other person is suffering. But why would I feel more for the other person than for myself? So he says, "Ki al atzmei yochel limtzei cheshbon shemagim lo hayisurim." When it comes to my own suffering, a person does a little bit of an accounting, thinks about his life, and he might come to the conclusion and understand maybe this is happening to me because of something that I did wrong, something that I need to improve. And that's where it's supposed to be. A person should try to work on themselves to improve. And if they see that something is wrong, begashmius, that means I have to correct something, beruchnius. Kumaymer azal, like our sages said, if a person sees that suffering is coming upon him, he should examine his deeds and correct them. If a person will look honestly, he'll surely find things that need to be corrected. And if he can't find anything, we know that the hardest mitzvah for a man to observe is that every free moment should be used for Torah study. Women don't have that problem. They don't have such an obligation that every free minute you have to use for Torah study. If a woman studies Torah, she gets a mitzvah, but she's not obligated to study every minute. A man is obligated to study every moment, unless he needs to do something else, whether it's personal or another mitzvah, whatever he has to do. But otherwise, so therefore, if you can't find anything that's wrong, I can't see, Baruch Hashem, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I didn't do anything wrong here. I didn't do anything wrong there. Why would this be happening? So the Gemara says, maybe there was an opportunity for you that you could have studied Torah and you missed out on that opportunity. And that's why it's happening. In other words, there's something sort of to blame it on. That's me. And therefore, he's not going to be having so much anguish. Adraba yekablam ba'ava shezatikal nafshe. He'll accept it with love, because he'll realize that this is something that is cleansing, that is healing, and that remember, we had this in the Geras HaTshuva in the beginning of the year, that the Alter Rebbe says that when a person goes through suffering, it's cleansing, it's healing spiritually. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe says that a person should be thinking, one of the things that we could think about is that just like the sun, when it travels millions and millions of miles up there, the shade on the wall moves 1 inch. So I'm looking at the wall from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and the shade on the wall moved 1 inch because the sun moved. But at the wall it moved 1 inch. Up there it moved millions of miles. Alter Rebbe says when a person suffers 1 inch down here, this could substitute, and this will take away millions of times more up there. So they feel, in a sense, a certain I guess, acceptance that Hashem gave me this little bit of suffering down here, and that'll do the spiritual healing and cleansing. And therefore, he's not as upset. It's like a person goes to a doctor, they're also suffering from an injection, from medication, from a procedure that the doctor does. It's uncomfortable, but knowing that by doing this, I'm going to be healed, it makes you tolerate it in a different way. But that's about me. That's not the way I should be thinking when someone else is suffering. When it comes to another person, it's inappropriate to make such calculations, and you can't make such calculations. In other words, imagine someone's suffering, you say, I guess they deserve it because they did this, that, or the other thing. That's pure klipa. Who are you to say what they deserve? How do you know what they deserve? How do you know what they did? How do you know what circumstances they did it? So when it comes to the other person, I should be thinking, that certainly is a good, and God forbid, don't judge the other person the way you judge yourself. And I would think, and even if I know that the person did something wrong, but I don't know what the circumstances was, how difficult of a test it was, how challenging it was for him, what brought him to do what he did. So I can't judge the other person. So if I can't look at the other person's suffering in a way that this is healing and this is something which is cleansing, then it's harder to tolerate than my own suffering, which I could see as something healing and something else that I can tolerate. So a person should be deeply distressed by other person's suffering, and he should ask Hashem for mercy for that person. Then he puts the brackets, and maybe because this is not for everyone, only someone who knows that this is really, truly, purely positive intentions. If he knows the emes that there's something wrong that the other person is doing, then he should tell him privately, tell him what he's doing wrong, and through doing that, he'll return to Hashem. And as a result of that, that's going to be that you're telling him, if you do this and this and this, you'll get this bracha that you're waiting for. So this is the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be rejoicing when the other one's good. You're supposed to be feeling anguish and pain from another person's suffering. But this person is not feeling that way. Page 73. But if a person doesn't suffer along with the other, and much more so if they feel happy that the other person's suffering, that's even a worse level. That actually makes me feel good because I hate the other person, and because the other person detracts from my space. Anything that puts the other person down, that makes the other person less substance, makes me feel better. Because in a way, that means he's occupying less space. He's not as important. He's not as good. He's not as happy. Things are not working for him. That makes him less substance. Less substance gives me more space. So in a sense, what we had in this chapter is, even though he seems to be talking about the same principle, but he is in the chapter here, he's letting us know that you have to look at things that are the way you feel, and you can recognize that really this is coming as a result of sinas chinam. Because again, a person might misinterpret these things. And he gives these two examples. The first example is that as a result of that, he puts down all the good the other person does, puts down his davening, his learning, his kindness, his mitzvahs, everything is put down. And the real reason is because it's sinas chinam. The other example of that is when a person sees that they're not happy with the other person's simcha, and they're not feeling pain and anguish from the other person's suffering, that's really a result of sinas chinam. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Let's just say the summary. Sinas chinam, maybe when a person has sinas chinam, it leads to that he's not participating with the other person's simcha or the other person's pain. He doesn't feel it, and it has no impact on him. And then he says, for my own kind of suffering, I can find a reason. And therefore, if I find a reason that I'm benefiting from it, then I can tolerate it. It's not that much suffering. But the other person, I shouldn't find a reason. I'm not supposed to judge the other person that they deserve it. So I don't have a reason, and therefore the suffering should even be more than my own suffering. Because another person, you're always supposed to judge favorably. Okay, we will stop here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You got my message?
I
Yes.
did. Yes, thank you. We're going in for the first time in a year and a half. I'm coming into Crown Heights. I'm so excited.
Okay, so you probably can get it at the stores on Kingston, I'm sure.
Okay, well, hopefully I could just